Ashford Street was the kind of place where nothing ever seemed to happen. A narrow road lined with old stone houses, their walls weathered by decades of rain and wind. The sidewalks were cracked, the trees bent slightly toward the street as if listening. At night, the dim orange glow from the street lamps painted everything in a permanent twilight, and the silence was so deep it almost pressed against your ears. It was the sort of place where neighbors nodded politely, but rarely spoke, where doors stayed locked, curtains stayed drawn, and people pretended not to notice the small things that didn't quite make sense. So no one paid much attention when the for rent sign appeared on the front lawn of number 42. The house had been empty for nearly a year, its windows clouded with dust, its paint peeling in long strips like dry skin. One evening, without warning, the sign was gone, and in its place, a man arrived. Tall, thin, a face you would forget the moment you looked away. He carried a single black suitcase and slipped into the house, just as the last traces of daylight faded. No one saw him again for days. No one heard him either, except for one sound. On the third night after his arrival, a strange hum broke the stillness. Faint at first, like the distant whir of a refrigerator. But the sound didn't come from a kitchen. It came from somewhere deep inside the house. Some said the basement. And sometimes, when the wind died, you could hear a soft, metallic tapping, as if something down there was moving. Emma Hale lived 2 houses down. She was 32, worked from home, and had a small brown dog named Bramble. Every night, without fail, at exactly 9 o'clock, she walked Bramble along the street and back. She was reliable to the point of routine, which is why, when she didn't come home one Friday night, people noticed. Bramble was found at the edge of the street, the leash frayed as if it had been ripped apart. His fur was wet, damp enough to drip, but there had been no rain that night. The police came, took statements, wrote their reports. They asked the usual questions, but in a place like Ashford Street, people had a way of keeping their heads down. No one saw anything, or so they claimed. No one except for Mr. Farrow, the elderly man who lived across from number 42. Farrow was the kind of neighbor who noticed things. He swore he had seen a shadow in Emma's window hours after she was last seen. He said nothing else, only shook his head and muttered to himself as the officers moved on. Over the next week, strange things began to appear. A single glove lying in the gutter, torn neatly in half. A hairbrush, its handle snapped, with long strands of blonde hair tangled into the bristles. A crumpled note found on the pavement, with just 3 words written in shaky handwriting. "I found you." The police dismissed these things as unrelated, random litter, they said. Coincidence. But Farrow didn't believe in coincidences. He began writing in a small leather-bound journal, recording every detail. Who walked where, what time cars came and went, which lights were on in which houses. In the margins of every page, he wrote a single word: basement. On the 10th night, just after midnight, a knock came at Farrow's door. When he opened it, a young man stood there, breathing hard, eyes darting toward number 42. His name was Daniel. His voice trembled as he spoke. "I think something's wrong with that house," he whispered. Daniel told him about the hum, how it grew louder late at night, about the tapping sound, like metal against metal, and about what happened earlier that evening, when he had walked past the house and heard, from somewhere deep inside, the faintest sound of a woman's voice. It had been barely more than a breath, but he swore she was calling for help. The following evening, the 2 men decided to investigate. They waited until the street was empty. The air was cold enough that their breath hung in front of them. The front door of number 42 was unlocked, the brass handle icy under Daniel's hand. Inside, the air smelled faintly of bleach, the kind of smell that lingers long after someone has tried to clean something they daunty want found. The living room was bare, except for a single wooden chair, placed deliberately against a wall. Its legs were scuffed, and there were faint grooves in the floor beneath it, as though it had been dragged back and forth many times. In the hallway, they found the basement door. The wood was chipped, the lock heavy and rusted, but it was locked from the outside. Daniel's hand shook as he pulled a small crowbar from inside his jacket. The snap of the breaking lock seemed too loud in the silence. The hum immediately grew louder, almost vibrating in the air around them. They stepped into the basement. The cold hit them first, sharp and biting, colder than the winter air outside. The walls were lined with photographs, dozens of them, faces from the neighborhood, captured from strange angles. Some were sleeping, others looked directly at the camera, eyes wide with fear. In the center of the room stood a metal table, its surface scratched and dented. The hum seemed to be coming from somewhere beneath it, and then, in the far corner, something moved. It was a woman, Emma Hale. Her wrists were bound, her mouth covered with duct tape. Her eyes were wild, pleading. Daniel rushed forward, but Pharaoh stayed back, scanning the room. Something wasn't right. On the wall to his left, among the older photographs, were new ones, freshly printed. The most recent showed Daniel and Pharaoh standing at the top of the basement stairs. The hum stopped. From behind them, the basement door slammed shut. A voice spoke from the shadows. Calm, measured, familiar. You shouldn't have come here. It was Mr. Pharaoh. Before Daniel could turn, the crowbar came down, striking him across the head. The blow sent him sprawling to the floor. Emma's muffled scream filled the room, bouncing off the concrete walls. Pharaoh stepped into the light, his expression almost peaceful. I told you, Daniel, he whispered. Something was wrong with number 42. I just didn't tell you it was me. Daniel tried to move, but his vision was fading. The last thing he saw was Pharaoh dragging him toward the metal table. Outside, Ashford Street lay silent, undisturbed. And somewhere in the dark, the hum began again.